everybody in the room. Live stream has been put on, so anything you say could be available to the public. So the microphones are active. Just
What's that? I'll tell you when we're getting close.
just about 1 minute out.
1 minute away. You got that control?
Je pensais que c'était carrément ce que je vais faire.
Je vais venir ici, pas de problème.
Later on.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Sergeant Jason Robillard. I'm a Media Relations Officer with the Vancouver Police Department. We have an announcement today from Deputy Chief Constable Lawrence Rankin. Deputy Rankin heads up our Investigations Division here at the Vancouver Police Department. After his remarks, Deputy Rankin will take questions. We're also joined today by Miss Susan Davis with the BC Coalition of Experimental Communities, Miss Larissa Maxwell with Deborah's Gate, and members of the University Women's Club. Miss Davis, Miss Maxwell, and the members of the University Women's Club will be available for one-on-one interviews following Deputy Rankin's remarks and Q&A. I would also like to acknowledge our other community partners here today who are stakeholders in the local sex work industry. Thank you. Deputy Chief Rankin.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm here today to make you aware of a 2018 covert operation led by the Vancouver Police Department's Counter-Exploitation Unit, a unit that focuses on issues of exploitation in sex work, with the assistance from the E-Division RCMP's Counter-Exploitation Team. The goal of this operation was to combat the exploitation of the most vulnerable segment of our society, our youth. The operation was divided into two projects, Project Serrated and Project Steadfast. The result was the arrest of 47 men over 9 separate arrest days. The VPD's Counter-Exploitation Unit works hard to shed light on how adults use online escort directories and social media to acquire the sexual services of underage sex industry workers. This criminal activity concerns police immensely, and I have huge issues with Johns and pimps gaining gratification or financial benefit through the exploitation of young people in our city. Last year, our detectives began a sting, an undercover operation, to proactively target adults seeking or willing to purchase the sexual services of people under the age of 18. The premise was simple. Detectives from our Counter-Exploitation Unit posted decoy advertisements on web escort listings and social media platforms for sexual services. After we made contact through text with the sex trade consumers, or Johns, our detectives advised them through texting the subjects in the ad were between the ages of 15 and 17 years of age. Once detectives established the age, a sex act, and fees with the Johns were directed to a hotel room. In the room, they found VPD detectives and uniformed officers instead of teenage girls. Over 9 separate days, the VPD arrested 47 men under Section 286.1, subsection 2 of the Criminal Code of Canada for obtaining for consideration the sexual services of a person under 18 years of age. This is an indictable offense that carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 6 months. To date, Crown Counsel has approved charges against 7 individuals. We continue to work with Crown Counsel for additional charges, which should occur over the next several months. I want to be very clear about what this project or these projects were not about. They were not about the sex trade in general. They were not about sexual relations between 2 consenting adults. These projects were about identifying arresting and seeking criminal charges against predators who were actively seeking to have sex with teenagers. These projects were about preventing the exploitation of our youth. The 47 men we arrested are from all walks of life, ethnicity, education, and employment. The list includes, but is not limited to, a school trustee, a member of an outlaw motorcycle gang, a school teacher, and a fireman. I want to thank our counter-exploitation unit for meticulously conducting the investigation and gathering the evidence. I can take questions now, and thank you very much for your patience.
So, do you have any information on the girls that were targeted? Are they from BC or anywhere?
There weren't actual girls. It was the undercover, it was the police officer that was posing as girls over text.
Is there an age range for the men that you can give?
I can't give an age range. Perhaps afterwards I can find out.
Can you just repeat again? You said school trustee, all of that?
School trustee, member of an outlaw motorcycle gang, a school teacher, and a firefighter.
You can't give us any details on what, perhaps what school districts?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Will we get these names?
No.
Of these people ever?
We won't be releasing them at this time.
Why?
Because a number of them have not been charged, and secondly, we want the matter to go before the courts before we're going to be releasing their names.
7 have been charged, so you could release
It's not
them.
before the courts yet, so I'm not about to release the names.
Is the school teacher still in his position?
I'm not aware of what the situation is at this time.
I'm wondering what the impetus was for this. Was there something police were seeing in terms of more people trying to target underage teens?
That's a very good question. This has been an ongoing issue, and since I became the deputy chief in charge of the investigation division, I've met with a number of community stakeholders. And the expressed concern, was Johns that were victimizing youth. My concern was finding an investigative strategy that would prove to be effective, that would garner evidence, that would meet the charge approval threshold. And as a result, I sent members of my counter-exploitation unit across the country to look at what other agencies were utilizing. And there's a number in Eastern Canada, as well as the Eastern Seaboard of the United States, that have used this investigative strategy. We subsequently met with Crown Counsel, explained what the strategy was that we were going to employ. They were satisfied that we would glean evidence that would meet their threshold of charge approval, and then we went forward and did it. The other issue is, as some of you know, we've targeted some high-profile pimps in the past. The issue for us, too, is the resources that we require to conduct those investigations. And this is something that we can do comparatively far more expeditiously.
Now, we've seen obviously some of the creep catcher stuff doing the same kind of thing, but illegally vigilante-wise. Are you trying to kind of show that if this is done by legal professionals, by police officers, that it actually can result in charges as opposed to the way they do it?
Well, certainly creep catchers is something we've discussed. That wasn't the motivation, but I think we can demonstrate that if we do it properly within the letter of the law, that we will affect not only we may be able to make arrests, but we'll be able to obtain the evidence that will secure convictions. Not only charges, but convictions. But the other thing is as I said, there's community groups. Deborah's Gate was mentioned by earlier as well, which is part of the Salvation Army, the University of Women's Club, who I've listened to on numerous occasions and have been very strong advocates for the work that we're doing here today.
You got 47 men. Personally, were you surprised the number was that high?
Yes, and it wasn't very difficult. What's shocking is, in speaking with the investigators, is we're looking at potentially hundreds of chat streams that were occurring over the social media platform with the police officers that were posing as teenage girls. And basically they had to turn down people. They didn't have enough time, given the shifts and the number of days that were dedicated to this investigation, to get additional charges. And the other thing is, you don't know who's who in the zoo until you get them in the door of the hotel room. So we have people that start texting and chatting that might stop and return, and then some individuals that just seek gratification by texting and thinking that they're talking to a teenage girl or texting with a teenage girl.
How many responses did you get that were not interested in underage?
That's a very good question. I would suggest the vast majority of the men that were seeking sex industry workers were looking for adult females, and so the vast majority would turn down the offer. But what's disconcerting is that the small group of men that were in fact were in fact discovered that this person they were communicating with, or believed the person they were communicating with, was underage, they were more excited about that.
And these people thought they would be paying for sex. This isn't one of those grooming a 15-year-old thinking it would be a relationship.
No, they would agree on the act, they'd agree on the fee and the location.
Have you spoken to any of the officers that were there in the hotel and what the reaction of these men was when they realized they were caught in a sting?
There were 25 officers that were involved in the takedown each night. And you had everything from people that would basically acquiesce and others that would fight. And each of the men that were arrested were interviewed. Many of them provided statements, attempted to provide an explanation. Some dismissed the officers. Some told them to actually go out and find criminals to arrest.
Was this Craigslist that you were doing?
I won't comment on the social media platform that we utilize because it could compromise future investigations or ongoing investigations, but it's suffice to say there's a myriad of social media platforms that we could utilize doing this. So what I'm saying is there's just not one, there's any number. So anyone who thinks, okay, well, I'll roll the dice and try to go to another platform, we could very easily be there.
How concerning is that for you as a law enforcement official that these men who actually came into a room under the guise that they were getting sex with an underage girl told you, we'll go find some real criminals, that there is a mindset that perhaps that isn't criminal to some people? How concerning is that to you? And a teacher among them, a fireman among them, a school trustee among them?
Oh, it's very concerning, but after 31 years in policing, there's not too much I haven't heard. I was in sex crimes for 4 years, as was a number of the investigators that are in the counter-exploitation unit. We've dealt with child abuse situations. I've dealt with pedophiles over the years extensively, and I hate to say this, and it's going to sound jaded, but I wasn't surprised.
Are you going to continue with this investigation this year too?
I beg your pardon?
Are you going to continue with this investigation this year too?
Given the success that we've had, I think that we're certainly looking forward or anticipating that we're going to continue this type of project. And I would like to continue this project with the RCMP, who've been very, very helpful and supportive in our efforts.
Are all of these Vancouver men that were charged? Can you at least tell us that?
No.
Some of them were from different cities in Metro Vancouver?
Yes.
Always a girl. Did you ever pose as a boy?
No. That's a good question, but no, we're posing as young women.
This thing happened in Vancouver, though, obviously. The hotel you were at was in Vancouver. Can you tell us what hotel it was?
Can I just clarify that none of these men knew each other? There's no indication of perhaps a sex ring or anything like this, or a kind of a organization or group?
That's a very good question. There's no evidence to indicate that these men knew each other, but there is... Can I comment on that? Is it the PERB? There's a blog or a website.
Prostitute Escort Review Board.
Prostitute Escort Review Board. And so our counter-exploitation unit members were also monitoring that board on the internet, and they would comment on, and grade, if you will, or score sex industry workers. And there was certainly a lot of messaging going back and forth that the police, the Vancouver police, were out doing this sting. But I guess, the drive for some of these men was such that they would disregard those warnings.
I mean, you need 3 professions that require you to get a check, right, criminal record check to work with use. Have you notified these 3 employees about, the firefighter?
Yes, they're aware.
So the employers of the firefighter, of the school trustee and the teacher have been told?
It's ongoing.
Ongoing.
The school trustee and the teacher aren't still in the schools.
I don't believe that's the case.
Have they been charged? Of the 7 charged, do they include, you can see we have a particular interest in the teacher, the school trustee. Are they among the ones who've been charged?
Yes, they are.
And the firefighter?
Yes.
So you can't tell us any details even though they've been charged?
No, I'm not about to release any details of this.
Were any of the men from outside of Canada residents?
There was at least 1 tourist.
Okay, and is that person
I don't have that information.
Canada, or?
I don't have that information.
Of the 7 that were charged, did any of them have previous criminal backgrounds related to sex crimes of any kind?
I don't believe so.
What about of the 47 arrested?
That's a good question, but I don't have that information.
What about the 18, 19-year-old who's, been recruited in since the age of 12, 13, 14? What is your concern about that?
The concern about that is if they've been recruited at that age, and even if they're adults and they over 18, if they are being exploited, if they are being victimized, if they are being, forced into continue to be in the sex industry, then we want to be made aware of that. And I don't think there's any police officer, Vancouver Police or otherwise, that wouldn't be willing to step forward and assist if they require assistance. That said, our counter-exploitation unit has investigated, as many of you know, individuals, pimps that are victimizing adults in the sex industry that don't wish to be in there and are being exploited. So that's what we'll do.
And what about exiting services for those? How do we address that to make it possible?
Well, just by way of example, and it was mentioned earlier, Deborah's Gate is one example where we've drawn upon their assistance on a number of occasions, and the Deborah's Gate is one resource that not only assists us in Vancouver, but other agencies across the country.
Have you secured the budget funding to continue this in 2019?
There's no issue with the budget. It's not that costly. So I've spent far more money on other investigations, so it's not significant at all. It wasn't even a concern. It didn't even enter my mind. And it is 286.1, subsection 2 of the Criminal Code, which is obtaining for consideration the sexual services of a person under 18 years of age.
Vancouver Police have released names before when people have been charged, even if they're not going to court. Why again are you not choosing to, or why are you choosing to not release names?
I'm going to leave the matter before the courts and let it fold out as it will, and I'm not prepared to release any names because we've got all these other names that are individuals that are whose files are being reviewed by Crown.
Can you let us know to what extent you were working with other federal counterparts on this operation, any other provinces?
Thank you. So we were on a conference. We had members on a conference in Ontario that were presented with this investigative strategy. I believe it was a York Regional. And when my members came back from the conference, I sent them to other agencies, police agencies that were also utilizing this. And then as a result, we came back. We've met with our counterparts with the RCMP. We've invited them out to the takedowns. So we're looking forward to collaborating with them as well, because of course the RCMP are the provincial police, and their counter-exploitation team would be of assistance perhaps in furthering this type of investigation.
Did you say what month that 9-day time period was in? Was it late 2018 or?
Between June and November of 20, yeah. There would be 2 separate 4 or 5 day takedown days, arrest days.
And the social media pages, I know you can't say too much, but are these common sites that, children are using, that you guys were using as part of this investigation?
I don't know if I would say they were common sites that children would use, but they could be sites that anyone who wanted to get, advertised could. So there's a myriad of them. And if you go on, you don't have to identify yourself as being under 18, but they could very well allow someone who is under 18 to go and advertise and seek business.
Did they present themselves as under 18 right away, or did they start a conversation and then say it?
Well, the conversation would be initiated by the John, and then during the conversation they'd say, by the way, I'm between 15 and 17, or 15, 16, 17, they'd say specifically. And then that would either cause the John to say thanks but no thanks, or intrigue them.
Is this going to be expanded over the country?
Well, it's not for me to say, because it's the Vancouver Police Department. At this point, given the success we've had, I would certainly be supportive of it.
So given that this contact that you had was through text messaging,
yes,
does that mean you basically have contact information for also the great majority that weren't interested in underage sex?
No, that doesn't. What the text provides us with evidence with respect to the Johns that we arrested. That's compelling evidence to support a criminal charge, that they were in fact communicating in real time with our investigators, thinking that they were underage girls. But no, we don't have enough evidence then to go after.
But you have their contact, that you know they are part of the buyer demand group.
Arguably, yes, we could potentially find out that someone sent a text from a phone number. Right.
Day that they were charged altogether? Has it been 7 over the past, couple months?
After your question, we have time for one more question after that.
So it's gradual. What we have to do is we have to have the evidence examined. So as you can imagine, the cell phone would be a piece of evidence that would have to be examined, and that all takes time. And of course, we're also working within recent case law, Regina versus Jordan out of the Supreme Court. So there's a reluctance to lay a charge until such time as all the evidence is collected, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. So
It's been like this, the seven weren't all charged on one day last week. It's been gradual since the stings up till now.
that's correct.
Did all the, one more question?
Yeah, last question.
Did all the takedowns go smoothly? Were there any incidents worth knowing?
I believe there was at least one person that wanted to fight, but we had enough presence there.
No one hurt?
No.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, guys. We have some of our other community stakeholders here that will be available for one-on-one interviews. If you like, just contact myself or Constable Doucette. Thank you all for coming.